so you can see is anxiety and coping skills, and it's with our very own school psychologist, McDonough.
Hello. All right, let's see, is this microphone working? Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you guys are here today. Thank you, Mr. DeWalt, for inviting me to come speak today on anxiety and coping skills. Let's see. Technology was working, and I tested this. Not working now. Right. Overview of our coffee talk today, a little bit about myself. I've been a school psychologist in Palm Beach County School District for over 15 years, and I've been Park Vista school psychologist, their one and only school psychologist, so I've been here all 13 years. Today we're going to talk about anxiety, the definition, signs, different types of anxiety disorders. I'm going to talk a little bit about test anxiety, causes of anxiety, effects, solutions, coping skills, parent tips, specific strategies, and then a test anxiety management group that we're going to offer here at Park Vista for students. And then some references are located in the back of here. A lot of this information I got from Dr. Huberty, who does a lot of informational talks with parents and handouts and information regarding anxiety and how you can help your student. All right, so let's get started. I can't get this thing to work. All right, so anxiety is one of the most common experiences of children and adults. It is normal, adaptive reaction as it creates a level of arousal and alertness to danger. The primary characteristic of anxiety is worry, which is fear that future events will have negative outcomes. Anxious children are much more likely than their peers to see minor events as potentially threatening. For example, giving a brief oral report might be slightly anxiety-producing for most children, but the anxious child is much more likely to believe that his or her performance will be a complete disaster. So overall, anxiety is normal. It's something that we all experience. And so having anxiety is a normal thing for children and adults. All right? Anxious children are likely to engage in a variety of avoidance behaviors to reduce exposure to the threat, whatever they're anxious about. In the classroom, they may be withdrawn, not initiate interactions, select easy over difficult tasks, and avoid situations where they anticipate increased risk for failure. Socially, they may feel uncomfortable in new situations, not initiate conversations, or avoid group interactions. They worry about being evaluated socially and fear that others will view them negatively. Although there may be some basis for worry, it is usually out of the proportion to the situation and it is unrealistic. Either a real or imagined threat may be enough to trigger an anxiety reaction. Okay. So from early childhood through adolescence, anxiety can be a normal reaction to stressful situations. So these things that I'm going to next talk about are things that you've probably seen in your own child. In infancy, it appears at about 7 to 8 months of age as stranger anxiety. So when an infant becomes distressed in the presence of strangers. And then in about 12 to 15 months of age, toddlers show separation anxiety when parents are not nearby. Both of these reactions are typical and indicate that development is progressing as expected. In general, severe stranger and separation anxiety dissipate by the end of the second year of life. And then anxiety at this age, from 2 to 8, is primarily associated with fears of strangers, new situations, animals, the dark, loud noises, falling, and injury. So those are all normal anxious feelings. And then up to about age 8, many causes of anxiety continue from preschool levels with a more focus on specific identifiable events. So with age, sources of anxiety become more social and abstract, such as worrying about friends, social acceptance, the future, and coping with a move to a new school. And then adolescents tend to become more worried about sexual, religious, and moral issues as they continue to develop. So in the vast majority of the cases, children and adolescents cope well with these situations and severe or chronic anxiety is not common. So if you were sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, my child did this, did that, that's normal. They should have. They should have had some of those experiences. All right, not all children will show all signs or show the same signs to the same degree, but a stable pattern that interferes with performance may be cause for concern. So that's what you would want to look at, a stable pattern that interferes with performance. That's when you kind of know that this anxiety is not in the normal development. The usual signs of anxiety differ between the anxious and non-anxious child, primarily in degree, and may be shown in one or more of the following ways. Excessive or atypical for age or developmental level. Thank you. Inappropriate or excessive for the situation on a frequent basis, and have persisted for several weeks or months. So those are those 3 bullets at the end there. Those are the 3 that you would really want to look at. So signs of anxiety, what does it look like? So it can manifest itself in these ways here. Thinking and learning, you would see concentration problems, memory problems, attention problems, problem-solving difficulties, and worry. Behaviorally, you would see signs of restlessness, fidgeting, task avoidance, rapid speech, irritability, withdrawal, perfectionism, lack of participation, failing to complete tasks, seeking easy tasks. And then your physical symptoms would be things that you would feel: stomach discomfort, rapid heart rate, flushing of the skin, perspiration, headaches, muscle tension, sleeping problems, and nausea. All right. A child or adolescent may have an anxiety disorder if anxiety is a pattern causing persistent problems. So like we said before, anxiety in itself is normal, but whether it to be a disorder, it would have to have some of these things here. Several types of anxiety disorder exist, impairing social, personal, or academic functioning. The frequency of anxiety disorders range from about 3% up to 20% of children and adolescents. In infancy and preschool children, anxiety disorders are not common. They are most often start to emerge in early childhood and may persist into adulthood. The frequency of anxiety disorders in boys and girls is about the same during elementary, but then as adolescence comes along, girls tend to be 2 to 3 times more likely to develop anxiety disorders. With a 10% frequency rate, a middle school class of 30 students could have as many as 3 students with an anxiety disorder, and perhaps 2 of them would be girls. So now we're going to talk a little bit about certain anxiety disorders. So one of them is separation anxiety disorder, and this disorder is associated with fears about leaving familiar people, usually parents. In extreme situations, children might refuse to leave their home or not want to stay overnight with a friend. Sometimes they refuse to attend school, and this could be called school refusal or school phobia. It's not unusual for preschool children to express separation anxiety, but persistent or extreme separation anxiety is atypical for school-age children and may reflect concerns about family matters, safety, or fears of social rejection. Another anxiety disorder is generalized anxiety disorder, and it's associated with pervasive and high levels of anxiety across a variety of situations, with no apparent events that trigger. It is the most common childhood anxiety disorder and tends to persist to some degree into adulthood. These children often are described as high-strung and are often very concerned about doing things well. They may show perfectionistic tendencies. The tendency to worry frequently about relatively minor things is a primary defining characteristic. Children with generalized anxiety disorder tend to stay in a relatively high state of physical arousal and often appear stressed much of the time. It also tends to be chronic and does not dissipate over time with help. So this might require professional intervention. All right, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is most often associated with distress as a result of a traumatic situation. And the most common types of trauma in children are exposure to violent crime, auto accidents, home fires, injuries, natural disasters, domestic violence, physical or sexual abuse, and serious physical illnesses. Symptoms of PTSD include emotional numbing, avoidance, detachment from others, sleep difficulties, angry outbursts, reliving the experience through stressful memories, flashbacks, and concentration problems. Incident rates for PTSD symptoms in traumatized children are as high as 20%, and the overall rate in children is about 3% depending on the circumstances. And then once again, girls appear to have higher rates of PTSD than boys. Social phobia is another anxiety disorder. Children who have excessive fear and anxiety about being in social situations and being evaluated by others are experiencing social phobia. The fear of social situations is out of proportion to the actual situation. Although some children may not be able to identify specific stressors, the typical age of onset is in adolescence or early adulthood. Although shyness and social discomfort can be seen as early as 2 or 3 years of age, typically the onset is gradual without obvious triggering events. Now, test anxiety is defined as an emotional reaction that typically accompanies situations where performance is being evaluated. If students feel unprepared and insecure in their abilities to succeed, they will experience feelings of apprehension and distress. Responses to test anxiety can be physical or cognitive, or both. Test anxiety is worry or fear caused by having to take tests. It is being so worried about a test that performance suffers. Every student who takes a test feels some anxiety. Like we said before, anxiety is normal. It's a normal reaction. But for some students, the feeling is so intense that it affects their performance with serious results. Some students can rise to the challenge. They see an exam or a test as an opportunity to show what they know, which is how you want to kind of present a test to a student. It's an opportunity. But others view them as threats. They dread them. They say, they feel like they might fail. And some of this is because they have failed in the past, or they feel they will fail again. All right, so here are some of the causes of test anxiety: pressure, worrying about the future, past experiences, fear of failure, poor study habits, lack of stress management skills, high stakes testing, which we are all aware of in high school, timed tests, and then comparing self to others. All degrees of test anxiety can be increased by high-stakes testing environments. And we are seeing a lot more students experience test anxiety ever since there's been mandatory retention in 3rd grade, and then lots of EOCs and all the standardized testing and the pressure that they have to perform on tests to get into certain and access certain programs, certain scholarships, and that's what the high-stakes environment kind of involves. Students who experience test anxiety tend to have higher levels of anxiety as a general characteristic of their personality. A certain amount of nervousness is normal in a test situation. It may help to sharpen mental alertness and concentration, but increased levels of test anxiety, however, may interfere with academic performance. All right, test anxiety may cause, so some of the causes here of test anxiety kind of mirror the table that you saw before with overall anxiety. So there are some of the same things that a test triggers in test anxiety. A social phobia person or somebody who's experienced a different type of anxiety, you'll see some of the same symptoms: mental distraction, difficulty concentrating, easily distracted by noise, uncomfortable temperature of the room, people walking by. I've had students who experience test anxiety that sit in a room kind of like this, but they can hear the clock over there ticking, because it's something that overwhelms them. They become distracted by just a slight noise, or noise interferes with their ability to focus. Mental blocks, difficulty thinking effectively about the task at hand. And then the physical symptoms are similar as well: fidgety, butterflies in the stomach, heart rate, perspiration, respiration, dry mouth, nausea, blood pressure, sweaty palms, muscle tensions, headaches. And then worrying. With test anxiety, you have excessive worriness about the concern of the consequences of the failure. May create deficits in information processing and retrieval of information and recall. So in this case, that worrying blocks you from recalling all those facts and figures and things that you knew the night before and knew all week long. The presence of task-irrelevant thoughts, such as "I am going to fail," just keep bombarding them during the test taking. And then irrational negative thinking. So those are some things that you would see and notice in a student who was suffering from test anxiety. Okay, causes of anxiety disorders in general. Huberty mentions in his papers, considerable research has focused on genetic and environmental causes of anxiety. In general, there's a genetic contribution of about 30% in childhood anxiety disorders. So about 30% of that may or may not came from parents or genetics. It appears, however, that a general tendency toward anxiety is transmitted rather than a predisposition for specific disorders. Biological influences include temperament, which is a fairly stable personality trait. So anxious children tend to have an inhibited, cautious, and tentative temperament that predisposes them to anxiety disorders. So some anxious children may have differences in certain parts of their brain that affect attention, concentration, and memory. Family factors appear to play an important role, especially from some parents who overprotect their children, model anxious behavior themselves, and prevent exposure to stressful situations. All right. So effects on school performance. As you can imagine, highly anxious children tend to struggle with various demands of school and tend to be inattentive, perfectionistic, forgetful, unwilling to participate due to concerns about failure or embarrassment, and they may avoid difficult tasks, seek easy tasks, and not volunteer or readily participate in classroom activities. Because withdrawal is a typical response to avoid feeling anxious, anxious children may be perceived by teachers as unmotivated, lazy, or uninterested in school. In fact, the majority of these children want to do well and be involved, but the motivation to avoid feeling anxious is high. And sometimes you can get this out of students when you talk with them and you figure out, well, why aren't you participating more? Or why aren't you? And then they let you know about these feelings that they're having. Anxious children tend to withdraw socially to avoid experiencing anxiety, which leads to further problems of fitting in and making and sustaining friendships. Over time, more social problems and deficits may occur, making the situation worse. Avoidance and worry may offer short-term solutions, but have cumulative negative effects and provide little long-term relief. So avoiding the anxious test or the anxious situation may actually make it harder to face that challenge later. So the more you put it off, the more anxiety is going to increase, typically. All right, determining what to do. If severe anxiety problems may require professional help outside the school, teachers and parents can ask some initial questions when determining what to do. So how typical is the anxiety for the child's age? Does it tend to be situation specific or pervasive across all situations and all settings? Are there any current events, changes, or circumstances that can help explain the problem? So have there been a death in the family, a divorce, or something that has triggered, this higher level of anxiety? It may just be temporary. What effects on personal, social, and academic performance are evident? And what has been tried to help the situation? And what has helped and what has not helped? So it's okay for a child to have some anxiety and anxiousness, but you want to ask yourself these questions. Is it happening across all different parts of their world and their settings? And how bad is it impacting different areas, such as social and academic performance? So school-based interventions and coping skills, and these would be suggestions for the classroom. So if the teachers were here, I would be talking to them about some of these things. Establishing predictable routines in their classroom, setting clear and reasonable expectations, breaking tasks into manageable units, having a specific evaluation criteria, and this is something that you can kind of complement. If a teacher gives a rubric out to an assignment or to a test, really focus in on that rubric, because that's going to help guide and relieve some of the anxiety. Okay, this is what your teacher is going to grade you on. This is the expectations. Let's check that off. Do we have everything we need? So that can kind of decrease some of the anxiety. Provide opportunities for practice and rehearsal. So if they are taking a test, you could help them practice performing on that test and quizzing them and that sort of thing. Or if they're going to do a speech or present a project, having them rehearse that project in small parts and practice it will help them. Pair anxious students with peers who are confident and supportive. Reduce or avoid unexpected situations. Reduce time constraints if possible. So in a class, if the test doesn't need to be timed, giving them that extra time to finish the test could be helpful. Move the students to a quiet testing with area setting with fewer distractions. So home-based interventions, parent tips. What could you do at home to help? The research shows be consistent in how you handle problems and administer discipline. Be patient and be prepared to listen. Avoid being overly critical, disparaging, impatient, or cynical with your teenager. None of you would ever be cynical with your teenager, right? These are all kind of good parenting tips in general, but these are some of the things that you would want to kind of hone in on. Maintain realistic, attainable goals and expectations for your child. Do not communicate that perfection is expected or acceptable. So trying to make your child be perfect and not have any mistakes can actually increase their anxiety level. So kind of look at the full picture and try to come up with realistic goals. Maintain consistent but flexible routines for homework, chores, and activities. Accept that mistakes are a normal part of growing up and that no one is expected to do everything equally well. Praise and reinforce effort, even if success is less than expected. Practice and rehearse upcoming events. We kind of talked about that before. Teach your child simple strategies to help with anxiety, such as organizing materials and time, developing small scripts of what to do and say to himself or herself when anxiety increases. Those are kind of like coping statements. If they feel like they always get nervous about certain things, having them have little coping statements with them will help them. And do not treat their feelings or questions and statements about feeling anxious as silly or unimportant. So you would want to kind of listen to it and kind of say, oh, I hear that you're feeling that way, or acknowledge their feelings. Because to them, it's not silly. Often reasoning is not effective in reducing anxieties. Do not criticize the child for not being able to respond to rational approaches. Seek outside help if the problem persists and continues to interfere with daily activities, which we mentioned before. All right, now back to test anxiety. So some interventions are available that address the physical and cognitive components of test anxiety. No matter what the cause, if it's physical or cognitive, one can learn to reduce the anxiety. And how will you know if your child may be experiencing anxiety? So in your handouts, I gave you the West Side Test Anxiety Scale, and that's by Richard Driscoll. And he offers this also on a website where it can be scored automatically. You don't have to add it up or anything. But it gives you just some questions that the student answers about how they feel when they take tests, how they perceive tests, that sort of thing. So, and it gives them a rating, and where they fall in the rating kind of determines, well, hey, do we need to work on this, or you kind of got it, you know? And it gives, and usually with students, when I do the test management, anxiety management groups, we fill this out at first, and then we kind of analyze their results. And that gives us a basis of what kind of worrying are they having, what kind of symptoms are they having, and which strategy would work best with them. So do any of the following statements sound like your child? So these are taken from reading material, but also some students that I've worked with. If I don't do well, I'll flunk the course. Then I'll never get into college. I'll never get a job. I'll live at home my whole entire life. And they go on and on and on. So what you would want to say is don't put your whole future on the line with a single test. It is unlikely that one test will make or break your chances or your goals in life. Sometimes hearing that and feeling that takes pressure off. And in a high-stakes testing environment, a lot of students are putting everything on the line on one particular test. Letting them know there is a plan A, there's a plan B, there's a plan C, there's a plan D. If you fail a test, it's not the end of the world. It's not the best thing to do. It's not our plan A thing to do. But letting them know that it's not the end-all be-all sometimes can really reduce their stress level. Another student, I study hard, but in the exam room, I just get confused. So better study habits and some relaxation techniques can keep your mind clear. So in the group, we do talk about how to study effectively. If maybe that's more of the issue than the anxiety. Maybe it's that you're not preparing well enough for the test. All right, here's another student. I always get so worked up in the night before an exam that I can't sleep. The next day I'm exhausted and I flunk. So you can help yourself by learning how to relax and control your anxiety. Also some time management skills. You don't want to study the night before and cram and get so tired that you can't perform either. That's a different issue as well. I just can't keep my mind on the test. It wanders to weekend plans, my friends, whatever. So this is a symptom too, that when they're in the test, they just can't focus on it. They see the test, but their mind wanders. So you can improve your concentration by learning some basic self-discipline techniques, which we would go over in that group as well. I never do well, no matter how much I study, so why study at all? So we hear that from students as well. Don't fall into the trap of having low expectations and negative self-talk. Studying can bring results, and it's a part of doing well on a test. So the self-talk is an important thing, and that's a huge part of coping strategies with anxiety is positive self-talk and getting rid of that worrying and that negative self-talk. So you can kind of see negative, it will never happen, realistic, you want to be in the middle and over to the positive. It will happen and it could happen. My sister's a smart one in the family. She always does better than I do. So if you have more than one child, you may hear some of this from time to time. Don't try to compete with others. Learn in the way that's best for you. So sometimes they need to take that pressure off themselves, that they may not perform the SAT at the top score like their brother did, their older brother who's now in Duke University or something. They're a different person, and that's okay too. Where is their best ability? Where are their strengths, and what are their challenges, and how can we get? So never try to compare one to the other. Everybody is different, even though it's amazing. They have the same parents, the same home, but they're two different individuals. All right. My parents have invested so much in me, I can't let them down. So letting them know that your parents are going to love you, you guys are going to love them, right? No matter what. No matter how they do on the exam. You might not like the score, you might not like the grade, but you are still going to love them, and they have to know that and feel that. It doesn't mean they're not going to try to do better, but they need to take that pressure off themselves. I always think of the answers after I leave the room. This is very common with testing anxious students. And that's because the tension has been released. Learning relaxation techniques could help you. So with this student, we would definitely want to do a lot of relaxation techniques to get their body to calm down while they're taking the test so they can access all their information and their concentration isn't blocked. So coping skills to help beat test anxiety. Like I mentioned before, effective studying gives you confidence. You want to set the right atmosphere. You want to make the most of your notes. Develop a study schedule and study habits. Create learning aids such as flashcards. Prepare yourself by attending all classes. Ask questions and seek assistance if you're not getting the material. So these are all things you want to do to prepare for the test. If you don't know the information before the test, then that's something different than test anxiety. That's you didn't study properly, or you need to do some tutoring or something like that. But if you can't, you definitely want to go in being confident. That will decrease your anxiety. All right, so you want to learn good test-taking skills. And sometimes these days with the tests, we do need to learn how to take these tests. There they are. Some of them are very tricky questions. So you want to be prepared. You want to definitely read the directions carefully, because you could assume it's a different answer and then the answer is wrong because you didn't read the directions carefully. You want to budget your time. Do easiest questions first if possible. Answer each question. Use the full time allowed. And for standardized tests, you want to get a guide or take a prep course. Prepare well before the test date and answer sample questions and sample tests. And even if you kind of know the material, just taking a prep course can reduce your anxiety because you've done it, you've sampled it, you know what to expect. So you're feeling confident that you know what's going to happen when you enter that room on that testing day. All right, more strategies for parents. Information. All right. Ensure, and this is more attuned towards test anxiety. So ensure consistency of your child's routine for completing school assignments, reviewing notes, and completing homework. Encourage your child to avoid cramming and help develop good study habits and good test-taking skills. And ensure your child has adequate sleep. You don't want to just sleep the night before the test. You want to have a good night's sleep weeks before. So it's really, you get the benefits of feeling refreshed. And like all parents, we want our children to maintain a healthy diet and exercise regularly, because all those things help us feel the best we can be. All right, motivate by reinforcing effort, not the grade achieved. So when you're trying to get your child to score a certain score on the SAT or ACT or even in your EOCs, you want to start by just reinforcing effort. Like, I'm really liking the way you're studying effectively. I really like those study groups you went to. I love that you went to that free tutoring Park Vista offers. I love that you went to, a study group at the library. I can tell that you're really putting in a lot of effort and really proud of that effort. And then if they don't get the grade that they achieved, I'm disappointed just like you are that you didn't get the grade, but I'm really proud that you did all these things, and I think if you keep doing that, you can achieve that. And kind of support them in that way. Practice short relaxation techniques as a family, and model learn techniques, for example, while in a traffic jam. So instead of getting anxious yourself, or maybe in a certain other situation, you'd want to model how you're going to calm yourself down, that sort of thing, and then they're going to be able to see how that works as well. Things to avoid. Avoid excessive reassurance. Oh, you're going to do great, you're going to do great, I know you're going to do great, you're going to do great. That's just going to go in one ear, out the other, and that's not very beneficial. Avoid giving them explicit instructions. You want to guide them towards the process, allowing them to control, coming up with their own study plan and guidance. That's going to build their own confidence that they can do something, that they did it, they took ownership of this process. And don't allow your child to ignore the situation, such as allowing them to stay home on the day of the test. Now, if they don't feel good or something like that, that's one thing. But if they are just really nervous, you kind of got to guide them out of that and say, listen, you have some strategies to do during this test. I know you can do your best. I know you're going to do your best. I know you can do it. Allow them those positive statements. Be informed. Know when your child is expected to take tests. Communicate the importance without overreacting. So that can be a fine line too. You don't want to be too reactive about the testing, because then that's going to create a reaction. You want to definitely communicate the importance. Ensure your child has studied the material and feels prepared. Some researchers have identified the root of test anxiety as poor preparation. So that's why a lot of it has to do with studying and test-taking skills and being in school and being in class. That's all going to help them feel more prepared, which gives you more confidence, which decreases anxiety. Encourage problem-solving skills in general. Teach your child that they have increased control over their outcomes through hard work and preparation. So pointing out things that they've done to solve problems in their own life, even if it's something small. Hey, I really liked how you talked with your friend and you were able to resolve that. That was a really good skill. I've never seen you do that before. That's awesome. You really solved that problem. Or I really liked how you helped that other situation. I didn't even have to get involved with your teacher. You went up to your teacher and you talked and were able to explain yourself. Wow, you're really gaining some good problem-solving skills. So just encouraging them and pointing out things and strengths in them can help them start developing confidence. If possible, support your child by helping them take a practice test under exam-like conditions at home. You can even get into the role and be the proctor and read the directions and set the timer and be very quiet. So you can really try to get them, in that test mode. If your child has taken a test, review the results if possible with them to find out why they made the mistakes and work on these skill areas. This is crucial with test anxiety too, because if you're overthinking, or if you knew the answer but then you changed your answer, you need to kind of identify if that's your response style. If that's something you're doing like 3 times on a test, erasing an answer you knew and changing it to something else because you're overthinking, you kind of need to know that about yourself. So it's a good thing to kind of take time with them and review over these practice tests, or even tests that they take in school if they're allowed to take them home. They can try to identify if that's something that they're doing. Emphasize the importance of trying his or her best rather than the test score, and praise your child for effort rather than ability. You really want to do that. Remind him or her to replace negative self-talk with positive message. For example, replace, "This is awful, I can't do this," with, "If I study hard, I can do my best." So if you hear your child say something like, "Oh my God, I have a test," or "I'm going to fail this test," no, you're not. You say, "I'm going to try my best," and get them to say it back. I know it sounds corny, But start with getting them to say it back, because if they are feeding themselves negative information all day long, then that's going to be something that interferes with their ability to perform. Remember that too much pressure can increase test anxiety. There's a distinction between your child saying, I must do well, and I want to do well. So you don't want them to get too much pressure on themselves. You want to have a good fine line on that. If appropriate, discuss worst case scenarios. And this kind of goes back to getting into Duke or getting into Harvard or wherever they want to go. Sometimes it's good to talk to them about or discuss a worst case scenario. What happens if you don't get into Duke? Will the sun come up tomorrow? Yes, it will. What could be plan A? What could be plan B? What could be plan C? The world will still go on if you don't get into this college. Doesn't mean you can't get in it later either. So sometimes discussing that with them can really make a difference. Make sure your child gets to bed on time. We talked about this in eating good. Ensure your expectations are rigorous but reasonable and realistic. And reassure your child that many students experience nervousness during tests and that you have confidence in them. So you can be a good support system for them, because they come home and kind of vent to you and tell you how horrible their life is, and you have to be there to be that encouraging cheerleader and tell them that you can do it. You got to do your best. You don't need to say you're going to ace it, I know it, or be overly unrealistic, but you need to give them that confidence that you can do your best. I've seen you study. You've been to school. You're doing a lot of things that you need to do. I have faith in you. I think you're going to do your best. So keys to beating test anxiety, we kind of talked about all of these. I'm just kind of highlighting them here. Study effectively, learn efficient test-taking strategies, use relaxation techniques, use cognitive restructuring techniques, and success can be achieved. So you can finally master being able to take a test without anxiety. Coping skills. So some of the strategies I gave you on a sheet of paper. So some of them, it's listed strategies. Cognitive behavior strategies, relaxation techniques, progressive muscle relaxation, systematic desensitization, visualization strategies and techniques, imagery, cognitive restructuring, stop, drop, and roll, positive self-talk, and thought stopping and thought replacing. So right now, I want to kind of do an example with you on a cognitive behavior strategy, which is progressive muscle relaxation. So if you guys, do you guys feel like participating? Okay, all right, let me just get a quick little water here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to begin by getting into a comfortable seated position. And I kind of want you to, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. So please do so. Then if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, you can just focus on a spot on the floor or in front of you, something that's not going to move. So it's important to start with some deep breathing. So you're going to breathe in through and out your nose, and make sure you're filling your lungs, your rib cage, and your abdominal wall should expand and fill with air. So take at least 5 deep breaths. Remind yourself that with each deep breath, you're physically slowing down. So go ahead, keep breathing. Breathe in through your nose and out. Your lungs will fill with air that will be transported through your body with each beat of your heart. Your heart will not have to pump as frequently now as your blood has more oxygen. Your heart rate will lower and you will begin to feel yourself relax physically. So breathe in and out. Allow any distracting thoughts to simply pass through your mind like clouds through a sky. Do not fight these distracting thoughts, simply try to ignore them. If ignored, they will pass. All right, breathe in and out. The progressive muscle relaxation will begin with a cycle of tensing and releasing the major muscles. Begin with your hands. Keep your eyes closed and begin with your hands. Clench your hands into fists, holding the tension there nice and tight for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and slowly release your fingers, feeling the difference between the tense muscle and the relaxed muscle. Now move up to your bicep. Tighten the muscle in front of your upper arm by bending the elbow and bringing your fist towards your shoulder. And hold the tension there nice and tight for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and slowly release your arm back to that state, that neutral position. Feeling the difference between a tense muscle and a relaxed muscle. Take a nice deep inhale, breathing in relaxation, and on the exhale, letting everything else, the stress, the tension, and any fatigue, just letting it go. Take one more nice deep inhale, and exhale. Now move to your eyes, clench your eyes shut, and hold the tension there for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Moving your eyes back to that neutral closed position, feeling the difference between the tense and now the relaxed. Take a nice deep inhale, breathing in relaxation, and on the exhale, letting everything else, the stress, the tension, and any fatigue, letting it go. Now we're going to go back to tensing and releasing of muscles. Tense your shoulders by lifting your shoulders to your ears, like when you're saying, I don't know. Hold the tension there nice and tight for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and slowly release your shoulders back down to the neutral position. Feeling the tension release. All right. Now we're going to tense the back of your neck by tilting your head back just a little bit as though you were going to look at the ceiling and holding the tension there for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and slowly going back to the neutral position. I want you to take 5 more deep breaths. Breathe in relaxation, and on the exhale, all the distractions, the tension, letting it go. Nice deep inhale, and really relaxing from your fingers, your hands, your forearms, your upper arms, your shoulders, and your neck. Let your entire body relax as though it could sink into a chair. And then we're going to take one more nice deep inhale, and we're going to slowly open our eyes. Okay. Now, did anybody feel just a little bit more relaxed than they did before we did? Okay. It's a little bit hard in here because we're all sitting in this kind of area and people are walking in and out. But if the goal is, if you do this at home in a comfortable environment, in a calm, you can really teach yourself and show yourself how you can control your body and how you're feeling. And that's the kind of thing I do this exercise with the students so they can practice it at home. So when they are feeling stressed or they do feel anxiety towards a certain situation, they know, okay, I can get a hold of my breathing. I can get a hold of that feeling I'm having in my chest. I can get a hold of that feeling I have in my stomach. I can do those breathing exercises and they become quicker at being able to relax their body. So that was just a simple little thing. I mean, usually the muscle relaxation, you do a lot more different body parts, but I just kind of picked a few just so we could do it, just so you could kind of get the feeling. And you can really get relaxed if you give it a chance. So also another technique, and this is more for the worrying kind of anxiety symptoms, and this is cognitive restructuring, and the goal of this is to stop self-defeating thoughts and shift the mind to coping thoughts, which are designed to reduce the worry component involved. So this is something that I do with the students as well, is trying to get them to come up with positive statements. And I think on your strategy sheet, I gave some examples of positive messages. I will do the best I can. I am capable of doing well. I know the material. I can do it. And I gave you a blank line, and that's something that you could get your student to kind of pick something that works for them. And then I tell the students, post this up in your room, post this on your mirror, post this in your binder, where you're going to see it and be constantly reminded with it, because you need to change that. And then that helps them. And then you can help too. If you hear them have a self-defeating thought, let's change that thought around. Let's make that a different thought. And really encourage them to say that thought out loud, because that helps them. And this is something a student did. What can I say to myself? So instead of saying, I'm not good at this, try thinking, what am I missing? Instead of saying, this is too hard, this may take some effort. Instead of saying, I just can't do math, try thinking, I'm going to train my brain in math. Instead of saying, I made a mistake, try thinking, mistakes help me to learn better. Instead of saying, she's smart, I will never be that smart, try thinking, I'm going to figure out how she does it so I can try it. So you can see how just changing what you're thinking and telling yourself every day can help you have a better outlook, more confident, and feel less anxiety. Expressive writing technique is another coping skill. I do with the students, write about what you're worried for about 10 minutes, get it all out, and then throw it away. And that kind of just gives them a feeling of getting all that worriness, whatever it's about. It could be about a test, a social situation, a presentation, anything. Getting them to write it out and throw it away sometimes helps students. Drawing technique, draw a self-portrait of yourself in a calm state or a peaceful place. And that sometimes they post that. That works for them better than a coping statement. Sometimes they think the coping statements are corny or silly. So sometimes a drawing or imagery. Like I said before, not everything's going to work for every student. It's what works for them. And developing a bank of positive coping statements, you got this. I'm a firm believer that you need to be your best cheerleader. If you don't think you can do it, why should she think I can do it? You know? So you got to kind of put that into your mind. So test anxiety management group, we're going to have the opportunity for students to participate this year. The sessions are going to be during lunchtime on Wednesdays, and they're going to start in January, the end of January, and go to February. Candidates for the group are students who are willing participants. If your student doesn't want to come, I don't recommend it. They shouldn't be forced to attend because they won't benefit from the group. They won't benefit from these types of exercises, and they could be detrimental to the group's success if they're, saying how dumb it is and that sort of thing. It's not going to be beneficial. Practicing the strategies that will be presented before and during a test can help students reduce test anxiety by feeling prepared emotionally as well as academically to do their best. So this group would be most beneficial for students who have mastered the concepts, they get good grades on classwork and homework, but then they experience the anxiety during the testing, either physical or cognitive symptoms, and they have difficulty performing and showing what they know on a test. So if your student isn't doing that well in the class, is missing the homework, is not getting good grades on the classwork, doesn't know the concepts, I would recommend more like a tutorial kind of thing, or a remediation or a tutor or something like that. But if if your student has the information and then they just get on the test and they overthink it and they have all these symptoms, then that's the kind of student that would benefit from this group. Some of the strategies and techniques that will be presented can also be applied to other aspects of life in other ways. Some sports athletes use some of these visual imagery techniques and relaxation techniques. Musicians, before they go out and perform. These techniques can be applied to other areas of life. If interested, I have a form up here. You can add your child's name and receive information and a parent permission slip for the group. So, thank you. That was my talk today. And I want to thank you all for coming. And you guys are very good parents for being here and just participating and learning information to help your students. So really thank you for your time. Yeah.
Will this PowerPoint be posted online?
There'll be sections of it. She's going to post some of the information. Okay. All right. Thank you all. And if anybody's interested, you can sign on for the group on this form here, and I'll get some more information to you.